I'm so pleased to be joined by this panel for this really important discussion. And it's about how to partner with young people in decision making, so growing democracy from the ground up. Now at UNICEF USA, we start with the simple idea that if we want better outcomes for children, we have to improve how decisions affecting them are made. So every day, decisions about children's lives are made in boardrooms, in budget hearings, in city halls, and these decisions affect children's lives, from everything about education to public safety to use of technology and economic opportunity. Yet the people most affected by these decisions, children and young people, are rarely meaningfully included or even consistently considered in this process. So we're here today to hear a little bit from our panel on what they're doing in their local communities to try to advance something that we're calling child-centered governance. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means as we go through our panel. And there's also a cheat sheet for you. There's a QR code on your table that talks a little bit more about these strategies. But let's get started here. And I'm going to actually introduce our panel members. So we have with us today two of our UNICEF USA Youth Council members. So here is Xavier, and Xavier is from Oregon, but he's part of the National Youth Council. And Hildana, who is also joining us. She's right here, local from the Bay Area, also on our Youth Council. Welcome. And Leah Defenbaugh, who is joining us from one of our partner cities, the City of Minneapolis, where she is serving on Minneapolis Youth Coordination Board. And also, fun fact, has also worked previously with PBS Kids. All right, so let's start. Hildana and Xavier, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your role in the National Youth Council and how you're serving your local community. All right. Thank you, Xavier. Heldana, tell us a little bit about how your work in the Youth Council and how you're serving your local community.
Yes, great. So, hi everyone. As Donna introduced earlier, my name is Heldana Thomas. I'm actually a high school senior, just like Xavier, from San Jose, California, and I'll be attending university this upcoming fall. It is also my first year on the council where I serve alongside my peers like Xavier and UNICEF USA staff to ensure that youth voices are not just being heard, but that action is being taken based on our opinions. Being an Eritrean American, I've been influenced by my family's circumstances, being refugees, as my parents were forced to flee their homes from Ethiopia. Being Eritrean 30 years ago, their life has impacted us now. And being the eldest child in my family, I've been able to guide my family through various processes, including being a guide not just for my parents, but for my siblings and community members as well. As I work not just to ensure that my family ourselves are secure and our path is successful, but that my community members feel supported as well. Being a first-generation low-income student, I've seen directly how conflicts have impacts many years or decades later, and that influences the work I do with UNICEF USA, as I work to ensure that not just Eritrean Americans are being supported, but those of all cultures and identities, as I see various conflicts around the world and how they've affected youth many years later in the future and have impacted their families. As my family members came here 30 years ago, they weren't able to choose education, but they were forced to work multiple jobs to survive. And luckily, thanks to my parents and their hard work, I've been able to support myself in my education and my siblings. And I don't have to worry about working multiple jobs to survive or to live or to just maintain a normal life, as I would say. And I've been able to be lucky enough to have very strong and supporting parents, such as my mother sitting here today. She's actually a caregiver, and growing up, I've watched my mom not only take care of my grandparents, but work very hard and long hours just to ensure that my siblings and I have enough resources as we need to make sure that we can have as much support as needed to ensure that we are not just successful financially, but mentally, emotionally. As many children who come from immigrant families like myself do not feel supported that way. And I've seen that not just as an Eritrean, but also from people across all areas. And I work within the Eritrean community in the Bay Area, or more specifically San Jose, as I serve as a chairperson of the YPFDJ, which is the Young People's Front for Democracy and Justice, where I work not just to engage with youth, but to make sure that there's a connection between the youth and adults, as there seems to be a divide between the generations, having the older members stick to cultural stigmas and the youth to our new mindset. It is important for me to be the bridge between the youth and the adults, especially seeing how decision-making isn't just important in local governments, as Xavier mentioned from his own experiences in Oregon, but conversations between family members can lead to change within your communities, whether it's in your dinner table at school, talking to a classmate, your teachers, or even in local governments, talking to your assembly members or stakeholders. It is always important to keep in mind about other people's experiences, not just your own, to create real change, not just in words, but from action. Thank you.
Thank you, Heldana. And now, I think as this shows that, and it's something that we saw when we worked with Harris Poll last year in doing a representative survey of young people in the US between the ages of 14 and 22. And we found that 9 in 10 young people, they want the opportunity to help shape the solutions in their communities, yet half of them don't see a clear pathway to be able to do so. So I'm going to turn to you, Leah, to tell us a little bit about your work in Minneapolis and your role in the Youth Coordinating Board and how Minneapolis is prioritizing youth participation.
Thanks so much, Darla. It's so exciting to be up here and to be learning from Xavier and Heldana and learning about the impacts of the work that we do. So yes, my name is Leah Defenbaugh. I am the Director of Youth Development Projects at the Minneapolis Youth Coordinating Board. The board is an interjurisdictional board that sits in the middle of the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, So to do this, we got together everyone from recreation managers to mental health professionals to police and firefighters, and did sort of a safety audit that we're in the process of now, and looked at where are we supporting youth and where are we not. And youth play a big part in creating that safety ecosystem to begin to solve these huge problems. So the Youth Congress is, the Minneapolis Youth Congress works hand in hand with us. It is a group of 40 to 60 8th through 12th graders that advise the city on different youth-related topics. We feed them, which is very important. I think you guys might know that if food is provided, high schoolers will show up. We pay for transportation to and from meetings, and we also pay them for their time because they are the experts in their own lives and they deserve to be paid for the work that they are doing for us. And their focus on safety is around metro transit. They found that they feel very unsafe, and in talking to their peers, feel very unsafe on trains and buses. So they're working with metro transit on the light rail expansion to change how light rail stations are constructed and make sure that they are safer when they're transporting to all different facets of their lives. And then they also work with us on the different safety topics to just make sure that we are in the right direction. And finally, we are beginning to use something that I'm pretty sure is in that code on your tables, child impact statements. And we're working with departments across the city to create their own child impact statements so that they have reference to fall back on to understand how youth might be impacted by every decision that they make.
Thanks, Leah. And I think you've really highlighted that sometimes decisions that we don't think impact children do impact children. And I think that's one of the things that we found at UNICEF USA is we're trying to make governance more child responsive and to make how the impacts of these decisions are more visible. Now, you referenced the 5 strategies, and one of the things that we've seen globally and growing here in the United States is the use of 5 key strategies. And I'm just going to reference them briefly, but that's one of them is youth councils, like we have like formal roles for young people in government. The second is children's cabinets, which is a way of coordinating leadership on children's issues, because a lot of times we see in government that expertise on children's issues is spread out, it's diffused across different agencies, and being able to coordinate that and pull it together can make it more effective. The third is child impact statements, is assessing how policies affect children before decisions are finalized. And then child-focused budgeting, which is aligning public resources with children's needs and being transparent about that. How much are communities investing in children? How much are in children's in budgets that benefit children? And then finally is youth ombuds offices. And we see these, we're elevating children's perspectives in government systems. These aren't as common here in the United States, but when you do see them, a lot of times they're more at the state level and they're focused on specific child populations, like those children in foster care. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to you, Leah, to just say a little bit about You've talked about all these ways that you're collecting information from young people and bringing them to the table, but how is Minneapolis using that information, and have there been any like recent examples or to be able to show how you've done that?
There definitely have been recent examples in Minneapolis that I'm sure you've heard of. We have, in the past few years, ended up at the epicenter of several emergencies, from George Floyd's murder in 2020 to the Ascension school shooting this past fall to Operation Metro Surge. And before I continue, I just want to say I'll talk a little bit about the city's response, but a lot of the response to Operation Metro Surge was community-led and driven, and so I wanted to take a moment to just celebrate the community in Minneapolis. But what we found in to focus on and check with youth to see if their assumptions are correct about the ways that their policies will impact youth. And during the height of Metro surge, what we found is that one department in particular, the health department, had been working very closely with us and was able to use that preparation to adjust what they had done around their school-based clinics and immediately move to different ways of getting appointments and vaccines and prescriptions to young people who were stuck at home. And that really came from discussion of how, with young people, how they move, what they do, and what would be useful in a situation like this. In addition, the Youth Congress continually wants to meet the moment, and so they were able to pack and distribute activity kits for young people who were stuck at home, who were sheltering in place, and those were dropped off with food and other supplies. So the combination of preparing for an emergency and knowing what to do while it happens and adjusting in real time to meet the moment, I think was really special, and I was really grateful to our Youth Congress members and to the folks at the city for all coming together to figure that out.
Thanks for that insight. It's so great to hear these stories about how something that sounds theoretical but is really used in practice, and how you're using that information and bringing that child lens. Okay, so Heldana and Xavier, I want, if you could share a little bit from your perspective of why does it matter to partner with youth in decision making, and if you have any examples from your work and when you've seen it done really well, and maybe also some things that haven't gone so well and things to avoid.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's essential to partner with youth in impactful decision making because just like any other marginalized community, our voices are also not being heard and represented fairly in these spaces. And that means problems are going unaddressed, concerns are not being risen to the surface to take actionable steps to remedy them. I think that's the biggest thing, and something that I've seen in my community, and it's kind of what got me involved and civically engaged in all these different councils and this community impact is, once again, through that organization, participatory budgeting, because it's an inclusive democratic process where normal people like myself have the agency and autonomy to work closely with different nonprofit representatives and people that have the knowledge and are able to disseminate it to youth so they can take that education to the next step of tangible impact. And so in my community, I was a freshman. I remember this organization took $500,000 in COVID relief funds, and it was a county-wide project. It brought high schoolers from across the county together of diverse backgrounds. Some people never met each other, some people were familiar, but what was the same were the issues and concerns that we had, and that was really empowering. And the idea that we were able to contribute to something larger than ourselves, disregard all the tangible impact, disregard the real tangible product that we've seen from this process. It was the process that was most impactful because, like I said, that opened the doors of opportunity so what I can help but walk in, and that translated into all the work that I'm doing now. And like I'm saying, from that $500,000, we were able to actually create some projects, and they're really pertinent to what was going on in our communities, and we couldn't have done that unless someone provided the space for us to critically think about the issues and problems within our community, because we know, we see them every day, but we're not always afforded the outlet to actually do something about it. And so we created a few projects. The only one that came to mind at the moment was a career fair, because when we talk about opportunity, it's something that also Calvana mentioned. Youth and people in general just aren't afforded the opportunity that they deserve. So we created a career fair to kind of remedy that issue. We created a menstrual products program where people can get equitable access to the necessary materials that they need. And then we also created a tutoring program where young musicians were able to shadow a real musician to pursue their passions and their interests beyond just school and education, when there's so much emphasis on what we need to do professionally, but not so much emphasis on how can we actually live life more mindfully and intentionally. And I will say, and real quick, in spaces where this hasn't gone so well, is where we have a lack of transparency. So we have the opportunity, we have the space, but then we're not seeing mentioned that you pay, you feed, you really cater to your youth because that's showing respect, that's showing that their voices are valued because I think a lot of people dismiss youth by saying they're lazy, they are unmotivated, but how can they say that we're not taking them seriously? I think when we take them seriously, they'll start taking the issues that are serious more seriously in their community, and then we'll see a rise of participation, we'll see a rise of more civic engagement because they are being treated as people that hold knowledge.
Yes, yes. Such powerful examples, and I really appreciate the idea that it's one thing to ask young people about their views, but we also have that responsibility to feed back how that information is used. So that's a great reminder. And I also love, because I've been so inspired by the conference during this week about how it's not just about making sure that children survive or are protected, but that we really want to see them thrive. So I love that the input for one of your projects was also supporting music and musicians and being in that creativity.
Yeah, if I could add real quick, if any of you are interested in making spaces, make sure they're fun and engaging because that's the most critical aspect that I see with youth. All the serious stuff, all this really like concerning problems around us, it's also good to have a lighthearted conversation and activities that are keeping people engaged beyond just profession, beyond just what are we going to do to solve these problems.
Great. Okay, Hildana, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, so going off what Xavier said, what we all mentioned earlier, it's important not just to listen to the words we're saying now, but to take action from them. Not just to listen, but genuinely think about what we're saying, carefully analyze the words we're saying and why we're saying it, why they're important, what they mean to us. Especially within my role in the National Youth Council, working with various members of UNICEF USA staff, I've really appreciated how UNICEF USA not just says that they work with children, but they generally take the words that we say and incorporate our actions into what they implement for children, not just across the country, but across the globe. And I will say, when we were lobbying in DC, I was able not just to take my own experiences, but also mention or be the voice for the students that or children that aren't able to represent themselves. I represent the voice of those who are voiceless. So it is important for me not just to think about my own experience, but to analyze the issues going around in the country, around the world, and to make sure that what I'm saying actually has a true meaning or a reason, that I have a reason behind everything that I do. And I've noticed not just within my role in UNICEF USA, but I was formerly a member of UC Berkeley's Pre-College Scholars Program, where I served as an ambassador. And as one of the 7 ambassadors, I was the only ambassador of color. So I was the only African American on the board. And I was able to serve a unique perspective, not just being an African American, but being an Eritrean American. And being an Eritrean American meaning that I'm able to take my own experiences, connect with others, and also help incorporate my decisions into the program, as we were able to make some changes for the program, especially for the next year, and how they took the mind of what I was saying and using it into how they implemented the program for the next year, and actually saw a positive outcome as students were more engaged within the program. They connected more within the campus lifestyle, as it is a 2-week program where students get to not only take classes but spend the nights in the dorms. So I was able to create some care packages, also incorporate some of my ideas into the framework of the classes, and I really appreciate that experience. And also, I just believe that decision-making, although we are saying that youth voices should be heard, it is not just important to be heard, but especially since we are the future, it's important that we're being incorporated in decisions now, so that we don't have to worry about fixing them later. Decisions being made now. Nowadays, I actually worry about how my future is going to be. Am I going to have to work harder to make sure that I can live in this country, feel safe in this country? Make sure that people moving here feel safe, not just me now, but will my children one day have to suffer or stress as I did, being a child of immigrants, of refugees? Will they have to live the same life that I had to, not only guide themselves, but guide their children, which is what I hope one day won't have to happen, but now is something that I'm stressed about.
Thank you, Hildana. I'm going to now have our last question before we go into some even breakouts of the breakouts. But, and I'm going to start on your end, Leah, and we'll go down the row. But if you could just say, what advice would you give to decision makers, regardless of whether it's in a city or in the private sector or in organizations? Like, what advice would you give to decision makers about how to engage young people meaningfully?
Absolutely. I would say that there are a few things to keep in mind. One is to be consistent, to consistently show up at the same time and to earn the trust of the young people that you are working with. To come in early, to have advice or discussions for them, but also come in before the impact is set. Young people are very smart, and they will know whether they are here to influence policy or programming, or they're here to check a box. And so getting in when decisions can be changed is extremely important. And then Xavier mentioned this, but following up and sharing what changed because of their input and having that accountability to youth is extremely necessary.
Thank you. Hildana?
Yeah, adding on to what Leah said, being there early, showing up first before the damage happens. I will say, coming from a family that had to flee conflict is very important to prevent those situations so that children like me or Xavier or children across the globe don't have to worry about how they will have to move their lives through those situations. And being early and just being there for the children before they have to suffer is very important.
Xavier?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say I love everything that y'all said, and it's definitely something that I've seen resonate with me in my experience. I would say if you're looking to incorporate youth into your work, do it holistically, don't do it in part, because you see that in the product, you see that in the result. If you're not committed to actually amplifying the voice of the youth, but more of a symbolic or honorific or tokenistic type of way, that shows in the result. And the youth know that. The youth aren't just ignoring it. They're not. I would say they're not like blind to it. This is the word I would say. They're definitely seeing it. Some choose to brush it off. Some are taking it to heart, and that's keeping them oppressed. That's keeping them marginalized, and that's the mindset that they're going to continue to maintain throughout their life and throughout their work. And so, like I said, if you want to incorporate youth, definitely do it holistically. Do it with intention, because we have something to say, even if we don't know how to say it. You all just said all that a second ago. And I think it's really important because it's really inspiring from what I've seen that youth have so much passion, so much dedication. We might not hold all the knowledge, but we definitely have the heart, we have the mind, we have the feelings of what's going on around us. I think that's the most important piece, that's just not being always considered these type of decisions.
And I'll quickly add on to what Xavier said, especially when it comes to passion. I've noticed that it's not just about the title you have or the education you may have. I come from a family that did not receive a college education, but they provided me with many different outlooks from their unique experiences. And I will say, turning that passion into action is what creates the real change. It's not just the title you have, but if you genuinely, truly believe that you have the power to create change, it will make a difference in youth life.
Yes.
Real quick. Really important piece. I did not want anybody to say this. It is a slow process. Integrating youth in impactful decision making, it is slow, but that is crucial because we aren't getting this education in schools. We aren't getting this education anywhere else, and so we're learning firsthand while it's from our firsthand experience in local government or in school clubs or wherever else that may be. So have patience, and also don't expect such a large tangible impact because, like I mentioned very early in the beginning, it's about the process. It's about creating civic leaders that are leading not only to tomorrow but also today and learning in the same way.
So thank you so much to our panelists, Hildana, and thank you all for sharing not just your perspectives, but your lived experience. And I think you've shown how, with really practical examples, how we can shape decision making and make a difference for children in local communities. So now, a little bit work for all of you. We have a few minutes, I think about 5 to 7, where we want you to think at your sit at your tables and discuss among yourselves a response to this prompt. If you could change one thing about how decisions are made in your community to prioritize young people, what would it be and why? So we have a few minutes, and then we'll take some answers from people afterwards.